Hello everyone and welcome to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. Today we're starting on Unit 3. The unit is about cultural patterns and processes. And today we're going to start off by just talking about what is culture, defining culture, and seeing how it applies to people in different spaces across the world. So we talk about culture and of course the study of culture. What we're looking at is a study of cultural geography. And what we're looking at really is a study of people's lifestyle, their creations, the things that they make, and then also their relationships. Now, the relationships that exist with the earth, the supernatural, and with one another. And if we look at all of these things, the lifestyle of people, the things that they find to be important, the way that they express themselves, the type of entertainment that they might partake of. When we talk about creations, we're talking about the things that they make. Now, the things that they make can really range pretty widely. It could be something large that they make, like buildings or monuments or houses, places of worship, or it could be the small things. It could be the toys that they make for their children. It could be ornaments that go in their homes. It could be the tools that they have to help them. Again, all these things are going to be part of this whole idea of creations, and we can really tell a lot about a people by the creations that they make. And then the last part, relationships. The earth, meaning the natural environment, the way that they interact with the earth. We talked about cultural ecology earlier in the year. The supernatural, talking about religion, and then also one another. What are the social relationships between individuals, whether it's between people of the same social status or maybe the leaders, and then of course who are the leaders within society, whether they're religious or political leaders, and then how do they relate with one another. All these things really are going to be kind of encompassed and part of cultural geography, and then of course we want to understand how does that change across the space of the earth. So when we talk about cultural geography, we want to ask ourselves this question about people, and then we could even ask this question of ourselves. We ask the question of, what is important? What's important to a group of people? What is it that they're going to emphasize? And when we ask what's important, we can look at, well, what is it that they're creating? We spent a few seconds talking about that a minute or so ago. And we have to consider that whenever a group of people create something, it has to be something that's important to them because they're taking time, energy, and resources in order to create it. And people typically do not take and expend time, energy, and resources on the things that are not important to them. So think about things in your own life, the things that you're willing to spend time, energy, and resources on, and those typically are the things that are very important to you, and that can tell us a whole lot about you. Whether it's the things you do in your free time, watching TV, playing video games, going to religious services. Maybe it's an extracurricular activity like a sport or art or band or any of those types of things. All those things can help us to understand people just a little bit better. We can look at what places are emphasized, and of course, if it's kind of easy to tell what places are emphasized in a culture because you look at the places that people take care of, lots of people interact with on a regular basis, and so in places that maybe are going to be protected in some way or another. And so if we look at the places that are emphasized in a culture, it tells us a little bit about. I think about in the United States. Think about schools, the way that schools are emphasized. We have compulsory education in the United States. Students are required to attend school, except for small segments of the population that have religious exemption, like the Amish people. That lots of people interact with them on a regular basis. We spend lots of money on them. You look at government buildings. You look at monuments, maybe like the 9/11 monument, the Vietnam Memorial. You look at the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument. All these places are places that are emphasized, and we take a great deal of care to look after them, to create them, and then make them a place of importance. And again, that helps you to understand the people a little bit better, and it gives you kind of an idea of what is something that is going to be significant to them. You can also ask the question of what is cared for and then what is cared about. This idea, when I was talking about cared for, that was kind of a few minutes ago, talking about something that we keep up with. It's something that we want to make sure stays in good condition. stays in good shape, and we want to take care of it for a long time. And then this idea of care about, these are things that are kind of we're emotionally connected to. What are the things that we find significant in our lives? And when we talk about when we care about, it's things that we tend to keep up with. So maybe you're an avid football fan and you keep up with stats, or maybe it's understanding academics, and so you really spend a lot of time focusing on that. Or maybe it's politics. So this idea of cared for, that's going to have to be a tangible artifact, and then care about is something that's a little bit more intangible. And then cultural geographers, one of the things they really want to know is why is it that different places around the world hold different sets of beliefs? And we see that historically. There are, for the most part, people all across the world have different cultures, different identities, depending on what part of the world that you're in. Now, as we move forward into our modern times, we talk about globalization. Some of that seems to be going away a little bit. Um, and that's a great concern to a lot of people. But we still have a pretty wide variance in terms of types of cultures and identities that are out there in our world. And so that's what the cultural geographer wants to understand. What is at the root of some of these differences between different groups of people in terms of what it is that they value, what are the things that they emphasize in their lives and in their societies? When we talk about culture, we can break culture into two subcategories. We have what's called the material culture and the non-material culture. And again, this helps us to kind of get into the ideas of the people and what it is that's going to be significant to them. When we talk about things that are part of material culture, these are tangible artifacts. Let me just kind of run down the list here. There are more than just these, but these are just a couple of examples. Things like clothing, things like the architecture and the buildings that are built, the money. You're looking at the money and who's actually on the money. Tells you something about the significant figures in their society. I mean, we spend so much time designing money and trying to make sure it doesn't get counterfeited. It has to be important to us. Architecture, in terms of how is it expressed, how is architecture expressed in society. And then you can also look at some traditional architecture and look at the types of materials that were used. That'll tell you a whole lot about the place. You think about the homes that we build and the way that we build them, and what do we spend a lot of time paying attention to in terms of the detail within the architecture. I talk about the TV room and how that is kind of the American sacred space, the way that we arrange everything in the TV room to kind of revolve around the television, and we set everything up, and so that's kind of our sacred space. The clothing, whether we're talking about the types of ideas that are expressed in the clothing, is it important for a woman to be covered or to be able to express herself through her clothing? Is it important that men wear business suits to work, or can they dress casually to work? All of those types of things. So these are considered parts of material culture. Then what's called non-material culture. And these are the thoughts and ideas and really kind of the values of a culture and the people. So we can look at religion, morals, philosophies, language, economies, and then government. And again, all these are going to be really expressions of values of a people. And we look all across the world and we see different ideas on religions, different ideas on morals, in terms of how do we treat one another, what is the proper role of individuals in society. We can even see across time how morals have changed. It used to be historically that slavery was something that was not uncommon. Pretty much everyone around the world did it. Now, of course, today is considered to be incredibly wrong to try and own someone. Those types of things. Philosophies in terms of what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. Language, and even the way that language is expressed and written down, and the way that we use language, and then the types of language that you might use as you interact with different people within society. Economies, in terms of what is the purpose of an economy? Is it for an individual to try and gain the most out of life that they can to make the most out of money, or is the economy to be used to benefit the whole society? And then how should those economies work within the country? And then government. What is the purpose and role of government? Is in what type of government do you have? Do you have a authoritarian dictatorship? Do you have a representative democracy? Do you have a federal republic? Where does most of the power lie? And again, a lot of that is going to be a reflection of the values and the thoughts of a people in terms of not only what is the relationship between themselves and the government, but also between each other within the society. When we talk about culture today, one of the really big topics is this idea of pop versus folk culture. And this is becoming more and more important because people are very concerned about the way that pop culture is spreading and the way that it seems to be taking over the world and kind of uh, putting the kibosh on more traditional cultures. You could also think of it as a discussion between modern culture and traditional culture. When we talk about pop culture, what we're referring to really, for the most part, is this idea of Western culture, and more specifically, we mainly mean American, but you could also say Western European. But really, what most people are pushing against is what they consider to be American culture that is spreading across the globe. So American values, American foodstuffs and food styles, American ways of dress and music, art, architecture, all these things. And traditionalists and people in general kind of get concerned because they feel like this is somehow subverting their culture. And you've seen some pretty harsh reactions against it in some parts of the world, whether it's laws that are created or whether it is attacks against what is considered to be symbols of American culture and American dominance and oppression by people across the world. Now, when we look at pop culture, some of the markers of it is that it is going to be carried to new parts of the world or diffused by new medias and new types of communication technology. So we're talking about radio, cable television, the internet, those types of things, and that's really important because when we talk about pop culture, it's going to one of the identification markers of pop culture is that what it does is it creates a homogeneous cultural landscape across a large area, meaning that most people or a lot of people are participating in almost the exact same culture, have the exact same set of values and ways of doing things, and way of treating the landscape and things along those lines. And one of the other markers of it is that if you look across space, there's not going to be a whole lot of change, but it changes very quickly over time. And so that's almost, again, that's pretty much the exact opposite of folk culture. So over space, we're going to see the same culture, but if we look over time, then we see a lot of change. If we look at what folk culture is, these are more traditional cultures, things that are rooted in the past and traditional ideas that took a very, very long time to develop among groups of people. The way that they're spread is through relocation diffusion. Somebody takes the ideas somewhere, so by word of mouth. And across the landscape, you're going to see a heterogeneous landscape or a different cultural landscape across space. So as you move from people to people, their ideas are going to vary. Not, sometimes they'll vary greatly. Sometimes they won't vary as much, depending on how far apart you are. But as you move across the landscape, you're going to find that different people have different values, and that's what this is getting to down here. That it varies greatly across space, but very little over time. So folk culture really doesn't change a whole lot because it wants to stay true to those traditions and those roots. And a lot of times, not always, in all instances, but a lot of times it's going to be pretty greatly impacted by the environment because the people are having to react to whatever environmental conditions that they are living in. Again, that's not always the case. You look at some religions around the world and things like in Judaism and Islam, where the pig is an unclean animal. That really has nothing to do with the environment because pigs are already there. It has more to do with their religious practices and things like that. So anyhow, that's just an introduction on culture. Come back in the next video, and we're going to be talking a little bit more specifically about some cultural terms that we need to be familiar with.